of the Regional Transport Committee, developing the Regional Land Transport Plan. We had our first meeting of the triennium, you'll recall, back in February, and we decided that we needed the workshops just to develop our framework. So I think we should finish by 12 today. That would be certainly my target. In fact, I should give full warning. I need to leave at 12. So if we haven't finished, I'll hand over to our Deputy Chair, Councillor John Scrimmager. I'd like to welcome a couple who weren't here at our first meeting too. I think Andrew Corkle from NZTA, Rep.
Yeah, I wasn't.
You were halfway up Kilimanjaro, as I believe, in February.
Struggling my way up.
Yeah. And also Greg Pert, representing the freight sector, one of our advisors, and also our AA representative. I'm sorry, Marie from AA. So welcome everyone. So let's see. Any apologies? Oh, yeah, no, but look, I've just been advised I should read out the following statement. I've approved all, as in my capacity as chair of the RTC, I've approved all workshops in this process to be recorded and uploaded to Council's YouTube channel, just for your information advice. This is to provide greater openness and transparency and to enable members to provide feedback on any of the workshops they are unable to attend. We don't have any members of the committee on Zoom, I don't believe, but we do have staff and other people on Zoom. Is that correct? Oh, good. Thank you. So there's no apologies. We don't need to have any mover and seconder there then. So
Mayor Tapsell, an apology.
Oh, yes. We received an apology from Mayor Tapsell? Not on the Zoom? Port of Tauranga, good. Welcome, Mark. Good, thank you. We haven't received an apology. Oh, yes. We haven't received an apology from Dan, of course. And so would someone please like to move, we accept that apology? Thank you, Mayor Drysdale. Seconded, Greg Pert. All in favour, please say aye. Contrary, carried.
So I point of this is a workshop, not a meeting, so we're not like resolving stuff, right?
Well, that's true. Yeah. That shouldn't be there in the run sheet. Okay. Good point. Thank you. Okay, let's move on to the next item, which is the Regional Land Transport Plan in development. That's 27 to 37 development plan, strategic monitoring and framework review. So I'll hand over to Ollie.
Thank you, Chair. Morena, everyone. I'll hand straight over to the project team. So we've got Katri and Nikki that are going to walk you through the workshop today. We've also got Tapu at the back of the room, who's part of the project team, who no doubt will get involved if we need any further guidance. Over to you.
Morena tātou, ko Katri taku ingoa. So good morning, RTC. My name is Katri. I work as a senior transport planner here at Poimoana, and I'm looking after the development of the next RLTP. As Ollie mentioned, I'm joined at the table by Nikki Carling, who's our transport planning team lead, and she's here to support with any questions and with the workshop content today. So as you know, we're here today for our first proper RLTP workshop. And the topic of today is reviewing the strategic and monitoring framework of the plan. As noted before, this is a workshop, so there's plenty of opportunity for discussion, and I'll also be pausing throughout the presentation this morning to ask for specific input from this committee. So let's get going. So in terms of outcomes that we're seeking today, so we'll start off by recapping on the briefing that we did back in February. Then we'll move on to discuss the main items of today, which is reviewing the strategic and monitoring framework. And then we'll finish off by very briefly discussing next steps. So as some of you will recall, we did a RLTP development briefing back in February, where we gave a very brief introduction to transport, as well as proposed and agreed on a focused and streamlined RLTP development approach this time around. So this is largely the same slide that you would have seen back in February. So as you know, the current operative RLTP was adopted by the Regional Council back in September 2024. And part of that development process, we did quite a extensive and comprehensive strategic review of the document. At the briefing back in February, the staff recommended that the current RLTP is largely fit for purpose. It does what it needs to do, and the aim is to largely retain the strategic framework of the current operative RLTP. So yeah, staff are hence recommending that we're retaining a large part of the current strategic framework of the plan, and we're focusing instead on meeting our legislative requirements under the LTMA, as well as focusing on the things that move the needle the most. So mainly in-depth stakeholder engagement, as well as the development of the RLTP program itself and the program prioritization methodology. So to enable more focus on the program development, we've taken the approach that you can see here, where we're combining the review of the strategic framework and the monitoring framework part of this workshop today. In terms of an overview of where we're at in the RLTP development timeline, you will also recall this slide. So we're currently in the red box for the first workshop, so reviewing the strategic and monitoring framework. That's then followed by 2 workshops in August and September, where we'll be looking deeper into the development of the RLTP program itself. You'll also recall that there's major events that run throughout this timeline. So the first one is the anticipated release of the draft GPS, so the government policy statement for land transport. That's due sometime this month, but from experience from previous RLTP processes, there might be a chance that that might be delayed. The other major event is, of course, the general elections. That's scheduled to happen in November. That's a bit later than normal. And what we're looking for there is whether there's a change of government and subsequently in a change in the GPS. You will also notice that there's a green bar at the bottom of this slide, and that's highlighting that the development of approved organizations' own transport programs is kicking off at the moment as well. So that's talking about Council's own long-term plans, as well as NCTA's State Highway Investment Proposal, or the SHIP, and that will be happening in parallel with the RLTP development process. So next, I've got a couple of slides setting the scene for the content of today, so reviewing the strategic monitoring framework. You'll notice that this section is much shorter than what was provided to you part of the workshop pack that was sent out earlier this week. So what we're aiming for here is very much to kind of recap on the current state of play and effect on the RLTP development. So in terms of RLTP development requirements, we must, of course, meet our statutory legislative requirements under the LTMA. We also need to consider government policy direction. So that's mainly the Ministry of Transport Outcomes Framework, as well as the GPS that we mentioned prior. Apart from following our legislative requirements, the review of the RLTP has also considered a number of other factors. So we, of course, have a number of changes in the national policy environment, and a summary of these have been provided part of your workshop pack as attachment 2. We've also discussed the content of this workshop today with the Regional Advisory Group, or the RAG, and that's a group consisting of technical officers from all the TLAs and NZTA. And that group is responsible for providing technical advice to this committee in meeting its legislative requirements regarding transport. So as mentioned, the RAG has reviewed and endorsed the content today, and they've provided technical advice on the topics that we're discussing today. And then, of course, we continue to work more widely with the wider regional transport sector, and we are also following the draft RLTP development guidelines that NZTA provides, and we are expecting these draft guidelines to become final shortly. This is a very busy slide. I won't be going through all of this. So in terms of key areas of interest and implications for RLTP development, what you can see here is kind of some of the key themes and some of the key themes around the documents that we've reviewed to inform the workshop content today. So notably, non-surprisingly, there's a wave of reform coming our way. So the RM reform, the introduction of regional spatial plans, will be a very key theme for the development of this RLTP. Another key theme emerging is resilience in the face of the number of severe weather events that we've seen kind of over the last couple of months, and the impact and disruption of these events on the transport system here in the Bay of Plenty. So to summarize kind of the impact and the response of all of this on the RLTP development, the bottom line is that we need to keep this review adaptable and quite dynamic to be able to respond to the amount of change that is happening around us. This is just another illustration on some of the kind of key themes and key challenges that are coming through for this RLTP review. So on the left, we've got the NLTP regional summary for the Bay of Plenty. And what we can see here is that growth and productivity, kind of congestion, the RONS projects are a key theme in the West. We know this. While resilience and safety projects are becoming more of a theme east and inland towards Rotorua. The resilience theme is also supported by the recent letter to Minister Bishop, dated the 10th of April last month, regarding lifting the status of State Highway 2, Waioka Gorge, to become more of a road of regional and national significance. So that was a very brief setting the scene. So we'll now move on to the main area of discussion for today, which, as mentioned, is reviewing the strategic and monitoring framework of the plan. So in terms of the guidance that we'll be seeking from the committee today, we'll be looking for the RTC's input and feedback on the following. So we'll be discussing the problem statements, the vision, the objectives, the monitoring framework, and the policies. I'd also like to note that the workshop content today is the main opportunity for this committee to bring more of a regional flavour to the RLTP, as ultimately the content of workshop 2 and 3, so development of the actual RLTP program, must by legislation be consistent with the GPS to attract funding allocation from the NLTF. So next, I'll be running through the 5 areas that we can see on screen, and I will be pausing at the end of each section to seek this committee's input. So we're starting off with the problem statements, the vision, and the objectives. So what are RLTP problem statements? So problem statements are clearly defined transport issues that we face in the Bay of Plenty that needs to be addressed. They ensure that proposed activities align with regional objectives, national priorities, and funding criteria. Our current operative RLTP, so the RLTP 2024, have 4 problem statements. So number 1 is urban areas and transport patterns. Number 2, access and mobility. Number 3, resilience. And number 4 is road safety. And as you can see in the red box, the staff recommendation is that these are fit for purpose. And I would now like to pause and ask whether the RTC is comfortable with this recommendation.
Thank you. Made earlier, we're going to have to be adaptable and flexible because we're in such a changing framework. But how do members of the workshop feel in terms of the appropriateness of those 4 problem statements? Edenia.
Just saying thumbs up, just keep it quick. So yeah, it's all fine.
Right, good. Any other comment, discussion?
Thank you, Chair. To me, there's a obvious one that's missing, which is our reliance on imported fossil fuels. Surely that's the fundamental problem we face, and it's particularly highlighted by the attacks on Iran and the disruptions to fuel supplies, globally speaking. But that's just a symptom of a continuing chronic problem, and I would have thought that that might be something we'd like to articulate.
Comment and discussion on that, or additional points?
So historically, emission reduction has featured as a theme that was removed last time and embedded within the wider problem statements. So what you could do is have any intent to improve fuel security sit under your resilience problem statement, but also access and mobility in terms of providing people with more transport choices, and also decisions and initiatives to support sustainable urban form and growth. So there are ways you could embed it within the problem statements that are already in the plan.
I appreciate that you could kind of see them as implicit in some of these, but I don't know, it's just for me, this is a fundamental issue with our transport network, and personally I would prefer to see it explicitly articulated. If that's not the view of the committee, that's fine. I'm not gonna go have another go at it, but just to say that I just think this is the fundamental challenge that we face beyond anything else, and over the long term.
Thank you. It's certainly an issue, and it's recognised, and I think it's implied in the GPS too in terms of efficiency, fuel, and other things. But I think Ollie's suggestion that we should be mindful of it when we're talking about resilience, when we're talking about those other aspects, and you know, if you're happy with that, I think we don't want to rejig it more than we have to. And this is at a very high level at a starting point rather than getting into key specifics. So what's the view of the workshop?
I'd agree with what you're saying there, Nando, important issue, but I think it's also important to remind ourselves what the purpose of the RTC is and the RLTP and what it can actually achieve in a period as well, and not to go too broad. So being able to cover it implicitly across other statements would fit well with me, particularly given we don't know what the GPS will look like either at this point. So there may be opportunity to flex and change later once we do know a bit more.
Sorry, I'd like to suggest that we actually make sure that it's captured in the narrative that supports these problem statements, and we can make sure that it, it has a good place in that narrative.
That'll be helpful. Thank you for that. And I'll have another go next time if it doesn't get around this time.
Yeah, I'm just keen, been talking to the deputy mayor to understand the first one, which is that urban areas and transport patterns. The problem statement is we've got unsustainable urban form and transport patterns. So what is that actually getting at? Is that greenfields? Is it, I'm just unsustainable urban form? What is unsustainable? Like, what is the unsustainable urban form that we're dealing with?
Very good question.
Your worship, the growth ambitions of the Bay need to happen hand in glove with the infrastructure. So what this is saying is that without funding for the infrastructure through this plan, the ambitions of the region would be unsustainable. So just saying that those things have to go hand in glove.
Certainly a statement, though, that you don't want to read too much into. I see your point, but I think Ollie's explanation is bang on, that it's something we must always be mindful of, that not because transport and public transport's just so integrated with spatial planning. The two are totally integrated, and that's what we all have to be mindful of.
Yeah, I might be able to put some specific numbers on that. We belong to heavy vehicle transport technology on a worldwide basis, and there was a lineup of some speakers from China, Sweden, Finland, and Australia, and New Zealand. And you might know him, Ken, actually, Les Bruiser, from the National Heavy Vehicle Regulator in Australia, basically saying, and it applies here in New Zealand also, and it's around about high productivity vehicles. So, basically they've led to 205 less accidents, fewer deaths by road crashes, 5.3 billion kilometres travelled, and about 2.5 billion litres of fuel use. So, there are some material advantages there. So, when you carry a little bit more, the more productive the vehicle is, there's about 11% less use of fuel to move that same amount of freight, and the road wear is negligent in that space. So I just wanted to put it out there. So there's some of the things, and that sits right under the road safety and resilience factor there. So just wanted to share those numbers with you.
Can I ask?
Thank you.
Sorry, can I ask from a policing perspective in that respect, though? How many more trucks have we got on the roads at the moment? Are we keeping?
Sorry, this is Phil Gilbanks from New Zealand Police. Sorry, Phil.
Phil Gilbanks from the police. Just from my perspective, we've got far more trucks on the road than we've ever had. And whilst those trucks haven't been the cause of a number of fatalities that we've had in the Bay of Plenty this year, they have been involved in fatalities in the Bay of Plenty this year.
I think we should remind ourselves, though, at this stage, this is at a high level. We don't at this stage want to get down to those sorts of absolute details. That on terms of road safety, what we're saying is network design is unforgiving or unsafe behaviour and errors resulting in avoidable deaths and serious injuries. That's the issue and the problem at a high level. If we get too far down into sort of causative discussions and debates, I think we'll lose the workshop's intent of just setting that framework at this stage. But I take your point, Phil. It's certainly an issue, but I'd suggest that that would come later in more detailed thinking rather than at this framework setting.
Roger.
No, I think it relates to it. I thought at first you were talking about the urban form, and I couldn't quite relate it to the urban form, but it certainly relates to this aspect of the problem setting. Yes, Kate Graham. I'd like to welcome Kate Graham, who joined us, and also other councillors who are Glenn Crowther and Deputy Chair of the Regional Council, Glenn Dougal. So welcome. And it's a workshop. If you'd like to participate and contribute, happy for you to do so.
Thank you. Yes, I'm not a member of this committee, but thank you for having me along. Just a question, thinking about the multimodal aspect of things. I'm just wondering if it should have road safety or just safety.
That instead of just road safety, it's total safety. Any comments or thoughts on that?
I think that's a very apt change. I think it's quite significant in terms of how we think about it, and as it should be.
From a technical perspective, we could just drop the word road. The problem statement itself, I feel, would still hang true. We're talking about the safety of the network, which, to your point, does cover more than just roads.
If you drop the word road, put transport network design rather than just network design, just such transport network, whatever form of transport. Randali.
Yeah, thanks, Ken. I'm just concerned that the current GPS for strategic priorities, economic growth and productivity, increased maintenance and resilience, and I know they sort of reference that, but they don't specifically talk about economic growth and productivity in the Western Bay. Our two biggest constraints in the west and the east are the impediments on movement for productive businesses, the kiwifruit sector, and people travelling from Katikati, Omokarua into Tauranga face significant congestion. Most all year round, pretty much, because of the increased growth of the kiwifruit sector and also the increased housing and populations in the west. So I think there should be at least some reference to those particular words, because just talking about impeding movement of people and goods doesn't really specifically state the purpose as outlined in the GPS. And I guess the 2737 GPS is not going to forget about that either, and also the maintenance aspect, because we know that the government changed their FAR subsidies based on that as well. So and we've missed out because of maybe we've had to increase ratepayer input because of their changing priorities. So we need to make sure we pick up on that, whether we're individual councils or one merged council.
Just hopefully for your reassurance, Councillor Daly. So what we're doing here is falling through to the atmosphere in terms of levels of detail. So we're starting with the problem statements, then we come on to a vision, and then we come on to the objective of the plan. The points that you've made quite rightly, we feel are well covered when we get to the plan objectives. So perhaps if we move through and then perhaps circle back and feel if there's anything that we need to revisit with the problem statements themselves, we can do so. But those issues that you reference are directly addressed, we feel, by the objectives.
Right, well, thank you, Ollie. And with that qualification, I think if we're reasonably comfortable, then we stick with those four, with that amendment that we just made to the last one. But we can come back and review it if we're not happy with that. We haven't covered it as Ollie described it. We fall through the atmosphere. And Mayor Failing.
Thank you, through the chair. Look, I'm just really, and I'm checking in with Ollie. I'm mindful that these problem statements, and I have a problem with identifying the problem myself. I think languaging is really important, and chasing the opportunity rather than defining the problem to minimise is just a thing. I'm mindful that we undertook a 2023 process of identifying the problem statements that were adopted in July 24, or whatever date it was, to hold true. So what I think I'm reading is a staff recommendation to retain the four. I've heard a number of statements made by elected members of possibly reframing so that we're more explicit and deliberate about what it is that we're trying to achieve. I actually support Mayor Drysdale. The explanation that was shared by Ollie makes all the sense in the world, but that is not what the words say. And if this committee are charged with having to go out into the Bay of Plenty area to help roadshow and promote and stand in front of, wait for the GPS, the timing around that has never made sense, but no one seems to be in a mood to improve that process. My question is, how have we been tracking since the adoption in July 24 to rationalise the retention of these 4 areas? Because they were identified like 3 years ago, and we are preparing for a 2027 process of adoption. Sorry, I do talk a lot. Thank you, Ollie.
Thank you, Your Worship. So when we developed when you developed the 2023 plan, we went through a much more extensive process. So we went through, you might recall, a logic mapping process, which then informed the problem statements. The staff review has highlighted that the problems that we set 3 years ago haven't fundamentally changed. So we're not looking to go through that full process again to expedite the process this time. But yeah, we do acknowledge that we can tweak and wordsmith if that's the desire of the committee.
Thank you, Chair. The suggestion is, how have we been tracking? We identified these as clear problem statements. If they've not changed, how have we been doing in addressing those problems? How can we demonstrate since the framing up in 2023 in order to rationalise the retention of them for the 2027 plan? I think they've not moved, in all honesty, but our approach of how we might resolve some of these problems may change, and we've had a range of different articulations around the table. But it then rationalises. I'm not suggesting that we go through the logic mapping at all. I think we did a lot of work. While I'm mindful that we do have new members at our table also, Chair, that weren't part of that process. So in order to rationalise the retention, just the explanation of how we've been tracking in order to retain these as our 4 main statements. Thank you.
Thank you. I think what you're saying is if you don't manage it, or if you don't measure it, you can't manage it.
So we do monitor progress. I'll pass to Katri, who can talk about our implementation reporting.
Thank you, Chair. So there's a few things in here to unpack. So first of all, the RLTP, the staff view is that it's a long-term document, right? So our vision sets a 30-year vision for the transport system in the Bay. It also includes a 10-year transport program. So we're thinking long-term for this document. When staff recommended in February that we are retaining a lot of the strategic framework, the view was that not a lot of the fundamental things in the last 3 years have changed. There is a lot of policy change around us. We've talked about that. But coming back to your question about monitoring, so yes, there's a section part of the strategic framework around monitoring, and we'll be reviewing the indicators or the measures part of the workshop today. That's something we currently report on to this committee annually, usually to the last committee meeting of the year, so usually in May, June. My plan was to talk more about those a bit later on, but essentially we're talking about a lot of the monitoring kind of being indicators of how our transport system is performing. So of course, the problem here is that a lot of the issues that we're facing, it's hard to monitor directly the performance of the RLTP and this committee. So they're more indicators of how we're tracking overall. But to give you assurance, yes, that's something that we are considering. And it ideally, we'll go through the whole policy cycle where we develop, we implement, and we monitor. And a lot of the feedback from the monitor ideally will flow through the whole strategic framework review.
So with that assurance, it's certainly an issue, but at this level, we're setting these high frameworks, and I think the assurance we've had is as we move down through it, we will come to monitoring aspects of it. And if you're happy with that,
Happy, thank you, Chair. I'd be interested in the 3-year monitoring since the adoption in 24. Oh, for the 24 to 27. We've just heard an articulation of it's really hard to monitor. I'd be really interested to see how that's the recommendation of how we might improve that process. So the discipline around identifying the problem, proposing a monitoring system. If it's not working, it's not working, and just what work we can do to support from a governance level around making that more meaningful and more useful for us and the people of the Bay of Plenty. Thank you.
I think the other thing to be cognizant of is ultimately the Regional Land Transport Plan is the funding bid to central governments for all approved authorities to get their funding for the next 3-year period. So we only move towards achieving what's set out in this plan if those projects get funded and are then delivered. And I think reflecting on the current funding period, a lot of approved authorities have had to go through a period of rationalisation and reprioritisation, given the funding that has been available in this cycle. And therefore, against some of these problem statements, progress has been limited. But that's not necessarily down to the quality of this plan. It's more around the funding available to deliver the initiatives within it.
Scrimger's been patiently waiting.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to go back actually to Greg's comment about vehicle loadings and the efficiency thereof. And I think that's not just an issue for heavy vehicles. I know there's all sorts of reasons why people drive one by one in cars with significantly greater capacity than that, for reasons of where they come from and where they have to get to. But this relates right back to Mayor Drysdale's comments about urban issues and also the accessibility, resilience and road safety issues. As if we could put some more people in a smaller number of cars, it would make a massive difference to the whole movement. So I just wanted to make that point.
And I think, we'll get there, and sort of policies like congestion charging and T3 lanes and things like that are all options that we increasingly are going to have to think about for that same purpose and reason. It's just that the freight sector has a direct incentive, whereas the passenger service at this stage doesn't have that same incentive based on pricing.
Yeah, thanks. I just want to bring us back a little bit to where we got to in the briefing last time. I think the fundamentals haven't changed, and most people around the table are the same, some exceptions. And the observation that from last cycle, the back end of the RLTP is the key bit where we decide the projects, and that was very compressed last time. So the key thing is, does changing this stuff help us get more money from government? And that's the fundamental thing. And we can spend forever wordsmithing it, but unless it helps us get more money, there's not much point.
If I can add to that, I've just been through the Waikato RTC workshops, and they did this in a very different way. And it was quite elongated, but ultimately resulted in similar problem statements. So back up your comment to move quickly.
Yeah, Daniel, that's very good advice. I think, the ultimate point is the bid in terms of the bucket of money. But we have to have this framework of what it's all about. So are we almost ready to move on? Mayor Daniel. Sorry, Mayor.
I think we are nearly ready to move on, and I agree with Mayor Daniel around it's about the money that we get at the end. But this is important in the fact that it's about what we ask for the money on, and just getting a pot of money, I don't think necessarily solves the problems that we need to solve for the Bay. So, I do get the view. I think it is important because all what we're doing today creates the basis of how we're going to prioritise and what we're going to put into that bid. So, I get the point, but it's also, this is quite important. I'm not saying I disagree with any of these problems. It's just it is important today that we get the direction right, because it will shape everything that we do when we get to that bid.
Putting my microphone on, we need to give a direction to staff in terms of their recommendation. And I take it then that we are, having had that discussion with the amendments that we've discussed, that we are comfortable with those recommendations and that we move on to the next one. Thank you.
Noted. And I'm also happy to come back to this if needed as we go through this strategic framework review. So hopefully the vision statement and the objectives will kind of help with the formulating of the problem statements as well. So in terms of the RLTP vision, so in terms of what a vision statement should contain, so of course it needs to be long-term, usually aspirational, guiding, region-specific and concise. Our current operative RLTP has the following vision statement. So our transport system meets the needs of the communities, our environment, and our economy. And again, you can see the red box at the bottom saying that the staff recommendation is that this vision statement is fit for purpose. And I would like to welcome this committee's input.
Comments and discussion on those vision statements? Yes, Kate Graham.
Yeah, I think that's great. I'm just thinking about the discussion that we've had about the vision being a 30-year vision, and balancing that with needing to get funding through the GPC, and so that sort of falls down. And I am thinking particularly around how we think about and cater for the long-term planning and provision for what I would hope would be quite a different transport system in 30 years' time. And so I just wondered if that needed to be incorporated in the vision in terms of the needs of our diverse communities, environment, and our economy. We're not just thinking about the here and now. We need to think about 30, 50 plus years' time and what we're going to look like. And I don't know if that needs to be signalled in our vision or not. And particularly thinking about how this is going to be quite an important part of feeding into the regional spatial plan.
I think the first statement actually does address that. Aspirational describes what the region hopes to achieve over the long term, 10 to 30 years. Does that sort of meet your view? Further comment? Yes, Grant Daly.
Look, I know you don't want a big, long vision, so just a couple of extra words potentially. Our transport system meets the needs of our diverse communities, our environment, and our growing economy, or something that reflects the fact that we are a growth region in New Zealand Inc. and a big contributor to New Zealand's GDP. So just maybe the addition of the word growing economy or growth economy, I don't know.
Discussion? I think me and Dankos had a comment first, then we'll come to.
Thank you. And I don't want to spend too much time trying to draft a vision statement by committee, because I've done that before and it's a nightmare. I do agree with the point that it doesn't, I think it does say that one of the characteristics of a vision is that it articulates what you hope to achieve over the long term. But I agree with the point that I don't think this does speak to that particularly well. So I think it could say something in there that's a bit more future focused. I think that would be helpful, because I agree that the transport system is going to look very different in 30 years' time. The other thing I was going to say is that I'm not sure what the needs of our environment are from a transport system. The environment doesn't need anything from a transport system except to be left alone. So I think that could be rejigged in a way that makes a bit more sense.
That environment includes social and economic as well as ecological aspects. Mm.
Thank you, Chair. I was just going to suggest as, with the changing words, our transport system meets the changing needs of our diverse communities, our environment and our economy. And then we recognise that.
It is thinking future forward
Yeah.
as well.
And it's thinking forward from 2024. So it's,
So you're suggesting the aspirational aspect, just,
just in the vision that we add the word
oh, right,
changing before needs.
yeah. Yeah, that's a very good comment. How do others feel about that? Yes, Mayor Fanning.
I'm going to be like Mayor Tunsos and just keep having a go. Look, we were very fortunate to host Waka Kotahi NZTA very recently. We've just had a discussion about the ultimate purpose of the plan, which is to put up bids nationally, get as much funding as we can in order to achieve some of these things. So I think the languaging, and I'm happy for Andrew to correct me, I don't do it often, but I want to be accurate. I believe the languaging is around our transport system keeps our people moving, keeps our communities moving, keeps our communities safe, and keeps our communities connected. If we have a shared languaging that makes sense from the bidder to those who are considering the bids, it might reflect some of that, but it was around keeping us moving, keeping us safe, and keeping us connected, or something along that line.
You're referring a little bit more, Mayor Failing, to probably our NZTA purpose and vision alongside kind of the drivers within the GPS. And I'd suggest that, does the vision need to align directly with those when the GPS may change? This is your vision as a region, I guess. And it's a long-term vision. I wouldn't think you need to align it if it's indeed a 30-year vision with a plan that changes every 3 years, which is out of your control.
I'm proposing that there wouldn't be anyone in this room who would be interested in disconnecting us, keeping us unsafe, or keeping us disconnected. There is a consideration of that. Does that hold true for all of the communities across the Bay of Plenty? Just heightening the environmental consideration and the facilitating of our economy aspirations as well. Thank you.
Right, well, there's been some good discussion there. I think that suggested change to that first bullet point, the chapeau statement, was quite useful. So I think as a help direction for staff, that's valuable. So with those discussions, are we happy to move on?
Yeah, I agree with that change. And I'm just wondering, just to try to be useful in terms of addressing my concern, I think if people agree, could easily articulate it like our transport system meets the changing needs of our diverse communities and our environment while reducing harm to the environment or minimising harm to the environment or something like that, because I think that's kind of what we're trying to say, isn't it?
To clarify, are you suggesting that it would be something along the lines of meets the needs of our diverse communities and our economy whilst dot the economy?
Yeah, dot the environment. Yeah.
Sorry, the environment. Yeah.
Just because, as I say, it just doesn't make sense to me as a statement at the moment.
Right, are we happy with that as a general direction and guidance? Good, right, let's move on. Thank you.
Thank you, noted. Moving on to the objectives. I might need a hand, Amanda.
Moment. Objectives.
So you'll see in your workshop pack, there's some further information on the Ministry of Transport Outcomes framework, which the RLTP needs to align with. So the table on the slide here highlights how our current objectives correlate with the MOT Transport Outcomes framework. And as you can see, they largely do.
One thing I just add here, Katri, to the previous discussion around making sure that we're aligned with what is considered when they're going through funding allocation. The ministry's outcomes framework is the key thing that we need to make sure we're aligned with, rather than the NZTA outcome statement. So we feel that alignment is strong as staff. So hence the recommendations that Katri is putting forward here.
So Liam, so what you can see here is the staff assessment of our current RLTP objectives. So the majority are fit for purpose with 2 exceptions. So the first one is for objective 2. So the current objective reads, the environmental effects, including emissions arising from the use of the transport system, are minimized. And this objective is proposed to be renamed promoting economic growth by providing sustainable transport choices. And I feel this one kind of talks to Mayor Tancho's point to the changes to the vision. And a lot of this is driven by the GPS placing less focus on emission reduction and more on prioritizing economic growth. The second change, so the second red box on the screen, is for the current objective 6, and that currently reads as the transport system enables access to land for housing growth and creates connectivity between places where people live, work, learn, and play. The staff assessment is that this objective is proposed to be removed as it's appropriately covered by objective 4. And if we were to remove this objective and combining it with objective 4, our strategic framework, our objectives would directly align with the MOT framework, which talks to Ollie's point previously. So again, I would like to pause and welcome the committee's view.
Thank you, Katri. Mayor Daniel.
Thank you. I don't mind you changing objective 2, but the objective 6, the change I do object to. I recall having Stephen Selwood, that was where that was introduced, and I strongly supported him there. That the transport system enables access to land for housing growth is a fundamental tenet of our regional deal coming up. And I think I would prefer not to remove that. I think trying to suggest it's covered by objective 4 doesn't. I don't think that's right.
Just in response to that, Mayor Denio, before we go to Mayor Drysdale, we can keep it in. The rationale to consider removing was that in the new planning structure, this plan is subservient to the regional spatial plan. So effectively, the regional spatial plan would define the land, and then this plan goes and delivers. Whereas our thought was objective 6 implies that the transport plan is shaping where that land is. So just trying to make sure that that subservient relationship of the plans is set correctly. But if members feel strongly that it should remain, then it can absolutely remain.
I don't think it should be removed, but anyway.
Yeah, I agree with Mayor Denyer on this one. I think that objective 4 is good, but that to me talks around the efficiency of the network and getting from around the region. Whereas, we've got UFD, we've got through our smart growth, very focused on those connected centres, getting people to live and learn, work and play in small areas, so that therefore then leads into that efficiency of the networks, reduces the travel that people have to do, and the transport system. I get the subservient sort of relationship, but it has to like, we've got a situation out in Tauriko West at the moment where, our capacity for houses is limited, by the roading network. So, it's really important that those decisions are made along with that spatial planning and housing, because very much it's in here. Transport system enables access to land for housing. At the moment, the transport system in Tauriko is not enabling the capacity that we could have if the transport system was changed. So yeah, I'm agreeing with Mayor Denyer that one is separate from 4 and should be kept in.
I think we've had some good points made there, and while it may not strictly align, it certainly doesn't contradict the MOT outcomes frameworks. And in a way, I think the feeling is that it reinforces the comments in Objective 4, and very important for our region at this time. So is that the general feeling of acceptance for the retention of Objective 6? And is everyone happy with the removal of 2 for the explanation given? Mayor Tangos.
Predictably, no. Simply because it's not coherent to me to say promote economic growth by providing sustainable transport choices. What does that mean? I think if you want to emphasise economic growth or development, as I'd prefer to term it, you'd put that in Objective 4, which much more closely aligns with that goal. So I would leave Objective 2 as it is, because even if the government is reducing the emphasis, it's still surely a critical objective of ours. And then, as I say, amend Objective 4 to say promoting economic development or growth, if you prefer, by enabling people and goods, blah, blah, blah.
That I have with 2 is that we say the environmental effects. It's really the environmental adverse effects, because the environment is broad. It's the social, it's the economic, it's the cultural, it's everything. And then there's sort of the ecological aspect of that too. But to just say that you minimise it, what are you actually saying? Because some environmental effects could be positive from a social perspective. It's the adverse effects that we want to minimise. So it is a problematic the way it's worded. It's a question of how do we replace it?
Look, I know any suggestions I make are not being received very well, but in terms of Nandor's concerns, this could possibly be addressed by adding the words to the end of the proposed renaming that minimise adverse environmental effects.
Yes, Councillor Schuler.
I think I had a similar view to Nandor. I was promoting economic growth and sustainable transport choices, talking kiwi fruit. That was sort of understandable how that got there, but I didn't, when I read it yesterday, that didn't come out, so I would have struggled with that. I don't agree that we should take out the objective. I think if we add the word adverse in front of environmental, I think it covers a good point you've made, Chair, and I think it's incredibly important that we do have, we talk about adverse environmental impacts and not hide that behind economic developmental growth.
Well, I think the point's been well covered, and we've given a clear direction to staff, the feedback they're seeking. So it needs modification. So we'll leave it to you to sort of pick up the points that have been made. Yes, Nikki, you have a comment?
Just one question on that Objective 4. We started sort of dallying around changing Objective 4, but we didn't get anywhere on that one. Can we just confirm that one, please? With any change required?
Proposing a change there from the discussion. So I take it that stays, and we agree that it's fit for purpose as you state there.
And then just another flag for the committee. So in the changes you've suggested, we no longer mention economic growth anywhere in these objectives, and that was something that we felt might be of interest for the committee to make sure it is explicitly stated in your objectives, given the growth that's anticipated and the potential for future regional and city deals.
I think it'd be added to 4, yeah. That we, through, like, I think you, from and throughout the region to promote economic growth, I think.
Certainly fits better with 4. Yeah, good point. So we're given a clear direction there. Everyone happy? We move on. Thank you, Carly.
Thank you, noted. I'm just looking at the clock. Now would potentially be a good time for a break, or we can go through the monitoring framework first and then break after that section. Up to you, Chair.
Ollie. Sorry, I missed that.
Do you want to break from the
Oh, the question was, do we want to break for morning tea? Could we keep it to 10 minutes though? I'm just conscious of the time. So there's tea and biscuits at the rear. It's now 12:30. Could we be back at the table and ready to go at 22, please? Thank you. Right, the next topic we're moving on to is monitoring performance. So this is an issue that Mayor Failing raised earlier. So over to you, please, Katri.
Thank you, Chair. So yeah, as mentioned, we'll move on to the monitoring framework, and I'm expecting there might be quite a bit of discussion for this one. So just going back to Mayor Phelan's comment before, so we're following here the policy cycle of planning, implementing, and then monitoring. So this is looking at the monitoring part of the plan. So we, as mentioned before, we do annual performance monitoring on the RLTP. This is something we have to do, and that's usually reported to this committee end of the financial year, so usually in May, June. Also worth noting is that this reporting is often delayed, and that's simply because of data availability from our external providers. So historically, we've done quite a bit of reporting in the past. So the 2021 RLTP had a total of 27 indicators, quite a few. The current operative RLTP has 19, and having measures and having headline targets is a requirement under the LTMA. So we do need to do this. I also alluded to earlier that the RLTP measures are best regarded to as kind of system level indicators. That the purpose of them is that they're providing a snapshot of how our regional transport system is performing, rather than directly measuring the RLTP or the RTC's performance. And a lot of this is due to the work we do being influenced by a number of agencies and lots of external factors. And Ollie's been talking about the funding availability and how that reflects how our RLTP program performance. So as noted again in the red box below is that the current a large majority of the current measures are fit for purpose, but the staff recommended view is that some of these measures are removed for kind of reporting clarity, or amended. The target level is amended to kind of reflect the current funding reality. And then the staff recommendation is as well that we're simplifying this reporting. So we would have a max of 2 indicators per objective, which would make this much clearer.
Just before we move on, I just wanted to pick up on that reporting efficiency piece that Katri touched on. So when we've been through these processes previously, committee members have suggested an array of measures that they would like monitored and reported back to the committee. The challenge we face is the availability of data at a regional level and the frequency that that is updated. And what that has led to is a number of measures effectively not being reported because there's insufficient data available. So we appreciate the intent to monitor as much stuff as possible, but we want to be realistic with you about what is efficient for us to monitor as part of this plan.
With the maximum of 2 indicators per objective, how are we to decide which 2?
Correct. So I'll be talking through our current monitoring framework and then our proposed one. And I do note that if we keeping objective 6 about enabling housing, that would mean that our total measures would be 12 instead of the current proposed 10 that we're putting forward.
Dad, I think you had a comment there, did you, before we move on?
Well, just a question to Ollie in terms of the data available. I mean, do we get a free and easy exchange of information from NZTA, or are NZTA actually monitoring the sort of things that we're looking for?
So NZTA have a very expansive dashboard called Transport Insights, which reports on a lot of stuff. However, that data actually comes predominantly from territorial local authorities submitting it to NZTA, who then report it back. So yes, there are a whole raft of metrics in there. Our challenges normally arise around the more nuanced things. So, measures for things such as congestion and network efficiency, measures around the uptake of low or zero emission vehicles. Those are things that aren't frequently reported on at a regional level. So we can talk to national trends, but actually talking about, well, how are things going within the Bay of Plenty is very difficult. On some of those things, emerging technologies are opening up opportunities, which I'm sure we'll talk about as we go through this. But yeah, we'll try and signpost where members' requests might be challenging or inefficient for us to frequently monitor.
Back to you, Katri.
Ken, can I just quick follow up? I mean, we're having to initiate our own traffic transport studies to try and address our own congestion issues in places like Te Puke, but we've got TEL, we've got tolled roads, we've got cameras. Is it possible to expand the range of measures that NZTA are actually doing themselves with these tolled roads or state highways to try and address the fact that we've got people avoiding the tolls and taking local roads when in fact we want them to encourage them to take the toll roads and contribute to the cost?
I imagine that would be a level of detail, not for these measures and objectives, but it could be something if the committee wants to put forward as future project advocate for change through the NZTA. Something to add to that?
My other comments, Councillor Daly, would be anything's possible with the addition of funding. So yes, there are cameras dotted around the strategic highway network that do traffic counts, that monitor traffic speeds. But once we get down to a level of granularity, then there's a need to invest more in that monitoring technology and framework. That might be something that the committee wants to see as an activity within this plan to actually enhance that. And Tauranga City Council have invested in a platform to start to understand that better within the Tauranga City area. But at this point in time, it's a bit of an emerging piece.
Katri.
Thank you, Chair. I'm facing technical difficulties again. Amanda, can I have the next slide, please? This is a very busy slide. So this is our current RLTP monitoring framework. So as mentioned, it currently consists of 19 measures. the yellow ones are what we call headline targets. So we need to have one headline target for each objective. And that is a requirement under the LTMA, and the remaining measures are supporting measures. So yeah, there's lots of them. Next slide, please, Amanda. Another busy slide. So this is basically just saying that we've done a technical assessment. So we've involved the regional advisory group in the development of our proposed framework. So the dark blue are the ones that we are proposing to be removed. And then we also have a couple of the measures where we are recommending this committee to amend the target level. Next slide, please, Amanda. So, as mentioned before, this is our proposed monitoring framework for the RLTP. And again, I am noting that we would need to add a few measures in here if we keep the Objective 6, enabling housing, in here. The majority of the current measures that we've carried forward are fit for purpose. And again, just reiterating that we've involved the technical level officer group, the RAG, in the development of this proposed monitoring framework. So yeah, as mentioned, there's a couple of these indicators that we would like to bring the RTC's attention to in terms of amending the target level. So that's indicator number 1. So the top one on this slide, which is all about deaths and serious injuries, or DSIs. And you can see some options there in red. And I do have some slides following this where we can talk this through in more detail. The next one is indicator number 6, which is all about EV uptake. And then indicator number 7, which is about patronage growth. I would also like to draw your attention to a new proposed measure under economic productivity, and that's indicator number 3. So this is new from what you would have seen part of the workshop pack that we sent out earlier this week. And this is based on a technical assessment by Tauranga City Council staff that propose a measure kind of talking about that economic productivity challenge, the challenge of congestion, and what we put forward is a measure around increasing the number of managed lane case. So we're talking about T2, T3, as well as bus lanes, and then any other kind of traffic priority measures. So, for example, public transport priority at traffic signals within the region year on year. I would probably suggest I might pause here, and we can have a general discussion around the monitoring framework as it is now, and then I have 3 slides talking about those specific changes to the target level. So that was for indicator 1, 6 and 7, so DSIs, EV uptake, and PT patronage. But overall, I welcome this committee's input on the monitoring framework.
There's certainly a lot of detail in this rather busy slide. Mayor Drysdale.
Yeah, thank you. While I don't disagree with 3, around economic prosperity, 4, I do, because I think having a smooth road when you're sitting in traffic is really irrelevant. You know, I'd much prefer to talk about something around productivity, and you know, we've heard from Greg earlier around productivity. How can we reduce the amount of people on the road? We've brought in that brought back that enabling housing objective, and you know, it's about creating the connected centres where you can live, learn, work, and play in a area. But you know, what we should be measuring is we want to actually reduce trips. We want to allow people to drive less kilometres that's going to create significant, in a lot of these, if you reduce congestion, you stop people driving as far, that has an environmental impact, that has a productivity impact, has economic prosperity, people can get where they want to go faster, Greg's trucks can do an extra trip a day, without adding extra trucks. So it's all that, but I would just advocate that we somehow bring productivity into 4 and actually look at how we can measure or reduce trips to help with that productivity.
Further comments? Mayor Denham.
Just on the questions being asked on the, so number 1, I think with deaths and serious injuries, they will just statistical variation will bounce around. So it's a year-on-year reduction is probably not particularly helpful. So I think we need a specific figure over time. I'm open as to what number that is, and if RAG suggests 20%, I'm comfortable with that, but can't really comment in detail on it. And then also number 6, whether we have a target for EV fleet increase or whether it's just increase year on year. I think, well, if it increases year on year, it might just be 1%, which is pretty unambitious. So I think some sort of number there would be better as well. Happy to keep it at 30%, but don't have any technical.
Catherine, I think you signalled that we're
Yep.
going to go down deep in this further down.
Yes,
Right.
correct. So through the chair, so I do have some slides specifically on the indicator 1, 6, and 7. So the DSIs, the EV uptake, and the PT patronage. So we can get to that shortly. Just to go back to indicator number 4. So the road quality. Just to give you a bit of more context around this one. So through the regional advisory group, through the technical officer level group, especially our Eastern Bay colleagues found that this indicator was really important to them because it allows them to advocate for additional funding if the road quality in our more rural areas would decrease. So they were quite strong on keeping this indicator.
Right, yeah.
Thank you. So has enabling housing dropped off here because you had hoped it was going to drop off completely? Okay, so on our packs, on the headline target for enabling housing supply, we talk about in the blue and the indicator that sustainable and accessible development enabled by roading, public transport, and active travel. The headline target is saying increase the number of new dwellings enabled by each significant activity in the regional plan. So, sorry, in the RLTP. So, to me, if we are doing densification in Te Papa because public transport's good and because people are safely being able to cycle to work, we might not have done a significant activity in the RLTP, but that has enabled housing, which is a good thing. So I just wonder if you actually need that, if it's a headline target is that we've increased the number of new dwellings, full stop. Easier target, easier to measure, and we don't, we want densification that mightn't be suggested as attached to the RLTP, but it is hopefully because of transport and multimodal.
Through the chair, so again, to provide a little bit more context, we haven't actually reported on the current operative RLTP yet. That's something that we'll be reporting to this committee at the June meeting. So we haven't reported on that data, but I understand that it's been quite hard to measure. So the staff view is very much in support of the changes. Thank you.
And I think the other thing The other thing to add is these are headline targets, so it's looking at general progress towards these overall outcomes. So the high level target that you suggest, Deputy Mayor, would be appropriate. The other thing I'm keen on is Mayor Drysdale raised a question around target number 4. So I'm keen that we just bottom out the recommendation from the committee on that before we move on as well.
Greg.
I just want to talk about Mayor Drysdale's suggestion around productivity and efficiency. I think that's highly valuable and important. Less trucks is less exposure, if you want to use that. Less environmental, safer travel, and less movement. So I think we really, and New Zealand is lacking productivity, and it desperately needs to find some avenues that can support our economy.
Mr. Chair, for your point number 10, can I just put some numbers around that for a bit of context? So Port of Tauranga is a heavy user of rail. We've seen 95% growth in rail usage over since 2010. We saw a 7% increase in rail use in 2025. So we currently sit at around 53% of KiwiRail's rail volume across its entire network.
And just a point on that, some of the biggest customers to rail are trucking customers.
Yeah. We don't need to make some reference to that because this is the monitoring, and that's a pretty key point there in terms of that achievement of Ports of Tauranga. So that's input for staff to consider. Yes, Councillor Crowther.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, for letting me speak. I guess I have a concern, sort of having sat through this process before, around a couple of the targets there, which increasing the number 8, increased cycle paths, shared use pathway kilometres within the region, and also the increased managed lanes, etc. And it's sort of to Mayor Drysdale's point, which is you could have nice smooth roads, you could have lots of cycleways. I guess it just seems like we're trying to pick things that we can measure easily for the sake of that, as opposed to what we're really looking for, which is to have, safe, reliable travel on various modes. And under each of those categories, you could come up with something which would be much more meaningful to people. So I guess, although it could be easily measured, it doesn't seem to cut to the chase. And particularly if you look at 3, and I believe our council might have put that forward, but I think it could be refined to actually look, it'd be far better to look at the actual impacts of that than just the actual infrastructure itself, because we've seen cases in Tauranga where that's been implemented and it hasn't solved issues and it hasn't made things better on the transport network. But we've seen other things which have made it better. And to me, you just do what makes things better, not what you can measure easily.
Any comment in response to that? Oh, Mayor Drysdale.
I guess, yeah, from Sean over the back here, he's, he was just saying around that productivity, we've got a means to effectively measure the variability of our road network, which is very much, around that predictable traffic and how much delay, etc. there is. So he's just saying that potentially if the region wanted that, if you wanted to measure, we could expand it to the whole region if there was a desire to do that. And his expectations that the cost wouldn't be massive to do that. But I guess if we're looking for measures, and that sort of talks to Councillor Crowther's point there, is there's a way you can measure it as a variability. And we just had an experience this last week, where we closed a side road, Oropi Road, and that made the trip on State Highway 29A 800 times longer than normal. So it's some quite useful information.
Catherine.
Thank you, Chair. So going back to kind of Ollie's point earlier around the data availability and the data quality. So why we've ended up with the indicator number 8, so the total shared pod case, is that we find that it more accurately reflects something we can measure. So in the past, we've had mode share, which is based on the household travel survey with a very small sample size in the Bay of Plenty. So what we're recommending here, and I totally take on board those comments, is that we're looking at things that we can measure and that we have data easily accessible and that we have confidence in. In terms of whether we can include the kind of network travel time, that's something that we've had in the past. That's something that we've included based on TSP AFTE recommendations, but that has in the past been no data. But as accurately described, there's this new platform that TCC has invested in that might allow us to more accurately measure travel time going forward. Ollie.
And my proposal, if it's agreeable to members, is that we continue to work closely with TCC, the team over there. What they're trying to understand at the moment is what the baseline traffic situation is. You know, this is a relatively new platform, and they're starting to understand what a normal day on the network looks like in terms of how it appears in that software, and then what we could use that for to measure going forwards. So if it's agreeable to the committee, why don't we take that offline? We'll work closely with Tauranga City and come back to a future RTC meeting or workshop with a proposed headline target around network efficiency / journey time predictability, noting that at the moment that would only be for the Tauranga roading network. But as Mayor Drysdale says, that platform does have the capability to model and record further afield. That does pose the question, though, that if we have a holding space around target 4, so if we're looking at swapping that out with some sort of network performance target, then we did hear from Eastern Bay councils that roading condition is of importance. So do we want to maintain a headline target around that? And if so, do we want it to remain under economic prosperity or move somewhere else on the list?
A number of points there. I think, you know, Ollie made a good point about the east in terms of the condition of the road. So I think my feeling is that should be retained. The other one is the sharing of data and information. Well, that's always got to be a good thing, and the undertaking of staff to do more of that, because we could all be 1 or 3 or something else shortly anyway. So we should be moving towards that. My other issue was, from what I heard the reply, was emphasise Councillor Crowther's concern in that we're measuring things that are easier to measure rather than what we need to know. You know, how do we overcome that? It's easy to do something because it's easy to measure, but doesn't necessarily give you the information that should be the priority. But did I capture your concern correctly there? Mm-hmm.
Yeah, thanks for that last couple of points from Katerina and Ollie and Ken. I think quality of customer experience is more than just condition of the roads. It's about the travel time itself and how much time you're sitting in queues. That's the biggest concern in the Western Bay and Tauranga City. I understand the rural eastern districts are different, but for us in the Western Bay and Tauranga City, it's becoming more and more frustrating. You can just go to any community social media page and, well, I don't know, Tauranga, Te Puke especially, but you know, the waiting time and the congestion, the build-up of congestion needs to be measured. You need to know how that waiting time is increasing, and that can inform things like provision of new roads that otherwise wouldn't be considered. Like, you know, I made a submission to the Regional Council about adding a road from Seddon Street to Papamoa East Interchange. I understand it's being considered through other avenues. And, you know, how are you going to, how are you going to actually provide evidence to support that sort of thing to the government or to the councils if you're not monitoring that build up and frustration level within the people that are using these roads? So quality of customer experience should be expanded, whether it's a different bullet point or added to that one.
I just wondered if there was the opportunity to consider that roading quality metric underneath resilience and security. That would be agreeable, especially to the Eastern Bay mayors, given that that was something that was suggested strongly by your staff.
From the east.
Through the chair, absolutely. So it's not about the smoothness of the road or the straightness, it's just the resilience, that there's an assurance, especially for those across the Bay of Plenty region that have to travel further kilometres to get from A to B, to get product from A to B. That's actually what we were trying to understand. And reinstatement where natural weather events for roads of criticality, I think we've got roads of national significance languaging, but there are often very few options. And Andrew and I from NZTA had this conversation that there are just some really crucial routes. Mia Moore will know more. Yeah, I did say that deliberately, Chair, about some of the areas that link us through to the Tairāwhiti and all that sort of stuff. So it really was just about staying connected, having the ability to stay connected, and what options we have should we have to take some alternative routes. Especially for those that have to travel a bit further. Thank you. If there's another measurement to be able to capture that further, then we'd support exploring that. Thank you.
So through the chair, I'll just like to draw your attention to the current indicator number 9, sorry, which is around unplanned network closures. So that probably to some degree takes into account the comments from the east. But I think the difference here is that talks about key strategic transport routes, whereas the road quality one, so indicator 4, is talking about the customer experience of all our road users, not just the key routes and our freight sector.
Right. Useful comments being made there as an indicator to staff. Any further comments?
Just to, thank you, Chair, just to add a couple of comments. I do support the proposal to put that under a different category, because I don't think it does, it's not economic prosperity, it's a different thing that we're trying to address. So I support that. I do think there are issues around the quality of the roads in the east that that are significant, and there's road safety issues. Some of our roads are pretty diabolical. So I think, yeah, it is an important thing for us in the east. The other thing I'd say in terms of congestion, I understand the concerns around congestion, absolutely, but there is an indicator that addresses congestion. Whether it's in the right place, I suppose, is another issue. But to add another congestion measure when there already is one, I'm not sure that if we're trying to reduce the number of indicators, I'm not sure that's the way to go.
Comments? You happy with the direction there, Katrin?
Through the chair, so yes, we'll take this away, do some tinkering on especially around the objective 6, the enabling housing, and totally taking on board your comments around the economic prosperity and which indicator would be the most suitable. So thank you. We'll take that away.
We'll move on. Thank you.
Next slide, please, Madam. So we're now moving on to those 3 indicators mentioned before that had options for the RTC to consider. So indicator number 1 is around deaths and serious injuries, or what we like to call DSIs. So the graph here summarizes the number of deaths and serious injuries that we've had in the Bay of Plenty since 2017. I think we had comments before that, yes, this number fluctuates quite widely year on year. But overall, we can see that the trend line is slowly tracking up. So what we put forward for the RTC's consideration is whether you want to amend this target to kind of reflect the current funding environment. And I would also like to note that our current 40% reduction target by 2030 is based on the now redundant National Road to Zero strategy from NZTA. So yeah, we put some options forward for this committee to consider. So we could amend the target to be a reduction year on year, totally taking on board the comment made previously that yes, this number does fluctuate quite widely each year. Or we could amend this target figure to more accurately kind of reflect that funding environment, but we might still want to set a specific percentage target. So there's some options up there on the screen, for example, 5, 10 or 20%. And again, I would like to note that our regional advisory group was recommending quite strongly that we still retain quite an ambitious target because it does allow them to advocate more strongly for road safety funding proposals and initiatives. And again, I would like to pause and welcome the committee's feedback.
Thank you, Chair. I think seeing the numbers that we're tracking up, I think it's really important that we do as much as we can to stop it tracking up. I would like to remain ambitious. I think I think we do need to make sure it's tracking the whole transport system, not just roads. Further to a point earlier, but I would be. Yeah, I think we need to stay ambitious. I think it's something that we do need to keep trying to get funding for, and I think it's something that our people will say that's a really important part of what our roading needs to mitigate or promote in terms of safety, and not roading. Sorry, our network, our transport system.
So effectively, we've been changing 40% to a 20%. So that's really saying that the 40% was totally unrealistic. 20%'s ambitious, even though it's half of what it was before. There's sort of a contradiction in there, but yeah.
I want to reflect that we've got a general election coming up. There could be a change of government, and we know that a left-leaning government has different priorities, and road safety could be reflected in their different priorities. And you know, we lost some of our opportunity to increase low cost, low risk activities like road widening and stuff like that, which contributes to road safety. And so I'm not suggesting any particular target, but 40% seems unworkable based on the statistics, but 20% seems more reasonable target. But
I think we should remind ourselves it wasn't the current government, it was the previous government, Chris Hipkins, who dropped the roads to zero.
Just to add to that, you know, regardless of the government, current GPS still has safety as a focus. It's just done differently. From a road controlling authority hat perspective, state highway network perspective, would support the change in the target to 20. I just think it promotes more realism, especially with roads that are being used more and more in a country with an increasing population, growing port, etc.
And it's important to, just by setting targets doesn't achieve anything. It's what you actually do to achieve it or work towards it that makes the difference. Andrew, can you help us? From your experience, what do other councils of similar type regions, what sort of targets do they set?
Don't actually know. Do you know, Ollie? We haven't gotten to this detail at Waikato yet.
From the councils that I'm aware of, there's various targets. I think there are a couple that have maintained the zero target. And then there's year-on-year reductions, various percentages. But yeah, the 40% came from Road to Zero. So that was as Katri said, the reason for that alignment historically. But there isn't really a precedent from other RTCs on this one.
A comment on Zoom from Phil Gilbanks from New Zealand Police. Phil, would you like to comment here, please?
Yeah, just listening to what other people have to say, it's certainly not something we're going to police our way out of. We're sitting 4 over in deaths in the Bay of Plenty this year already, 10 over across the country. So, it's not just a localised problem, and it has been fluctuating up and down. I was at a serious crash last night here in the Eastern Bay of Plenty, just out of Edgecombe. Cars just turned right across the path of a motorcyclist coming through an intersection. It's not something that by putting a number of police cars on, there's certainly network issues, but some of it too is just driver behaviour. But like I said earlier, that we have had a predominant feature with heavy motor vehicles on the roads that have featured in our crashes, and it's not necessarily the driver of the heavy motor vehicle that's causing the crash, but certainly an element of frustration by the amount of traffic. So I think it's a much wider problem. Lots of heavy motor vehicles does slow traffic down, and we know that reducing speed reduces death and serious injury. But what it also does is creates a high level of frustration. And if you were to look at things like State Highway 2, travelling over from Tauranga through to Whakatane and then through to Gisborne, on that network where there's a high volume of traffic, it is one of our main freight moving, what's the word I'm looking for? Roads anyway. There is very little room to pass on any of those roads all the way through. Very limited passing lanes that can allow a substantial amount of traffic to move past those slower moving vehicles. So it's things like that need to be looked at to reduce the frustration levels that cause the crashes. It's a much bigger picture. So like I said, I'm really interested just hearing what other people have to say, because it's certainly not something we're going to be able to police our way out of. I do think 40% is totally unrealistic, particularly in this region with its growth and continued growth in the number of vehicles that are continuing to go onto the roads. Most of our fatal crashes and collisions aren't in the urban areas. So no matter what you do in terms of public transport or reducing the volume of transport in the urban areas, which would be great for other reasons, it's the network. It's the main network between the 80k plus areas is where people are significantly dying, and that's the areas that are hurting us in these serious crash and deaths.
Thanks. Comments, Phil. That's very helpful. So I think then we have a recommendation there from the RAG, which is the Collective Technical Officers of all the authorities, territorial authorities, that we go with 20%. We accept that the 40% was unrealistic. 20% is a stretch, but we should be aspirational in this. So is that the feeling of the group, that we lock in the 20% and accept that recommendation?
Certainly my feeling from a police perspective, 20% is far more reasonable than 40.
Good. Thanks, Phil. Mayor Failing.
Thank you through the chair. Hi, Phil. Mayor Failing from Kawerau. Thank you to you and your team for your help in our hapori about 3 weeks ago.
No problem, yeah.
Well, one day. Look, some of the conversations that I've had with previous police representatives have been about the reasons why we've had the context behind that. So the smoothest, straightest, most uncongested road may not necessarily directly result in the reduced numbers that we're after. So just the extension of the statement around reducing deaths and serious injuries as a result of the transport network specifically. So there's certain investigations, and my regards, Phil, to you and your team. I did read our State Highway 2 intersection collision on state just outside of Edgecombe. But just the extension of that specific reference, because as we've seen, post investigation for what we can and should be doing to improve our transport system, absolutely. Some of the limitations around and constraints around resourcing determine the speed and pace of when that can be implemented. But just as a result of the transport system itself, because where there is, like we've just heard, driver error, behaviour, whatever else that might be, there is nothing that this committee or the partnerships that we have can do other than do the best that we can within the transport system itself, Chair. Thank you.
And its impairment and inattention are the big drivers. So the condition of the road's a factor, but it's the other two that are the drivers. Right, if we're happy to move on then, thank you, Katri.
Thank you, committee. That's very clear direction. So we'll be amending that to a 20% target. Next up, we've got.
Sorry, Jane, I have to cut away. Is there any other major value for police at the moment? I'm talking about EV uptake and so forth, really not my domain.
Thanks, Phil. Any comments from members to Phil before he has to go? Comments? No? Thanks, Phil. Appreciate that.
No,
Thanks for your input.
Thank you, everybody. I look forward to what you come up with.
Thank you. Katri.
So yeah, moving on to indicator number 5, which is EV uptake in the Bay of Plenty. So again, what you can see here is the graph outlining how we're currently tracking. So currently we're on track to meet our 30% EV uptake target to 2025. And this is a target that was set to align with the first national emission reduction plan. Quite a bit has changed in that space since then. But this second emission reduction plan still focuses on EVs, even if it's more centered around building EV charging infrastructure. So again, we've discussed this indicator with the regional advisory group. It's recommended that we keep it, but we have it as a supportive measure, so not as a headline target. And then I would also like to note there was some discussion at the regional advisory group level whether we should expand this measure to include low emission vehicles more widely. We had a really good discussion around it. Kind of the sense we got is that, and kind of going back to Mayor Tancho's point around the fuel availability at the moment, hybrid vehicles, etc., still use fossil fuels. So in light of that, the staff recommendation is that we keep focusing on EV uptake in itself. And I know Ollie has a comment.
And I think just the other thing to tease out from the discussion with the RAG, whilst we appreciate that the intent of what this target is trying to measure is the shift towards a lower emission transport fleet, the challenge that we have is the only thing that we can measure currently at a regional level is the number of EVs in the fleet. Hybrid and low emission vehicles as part of the fleet is only reported as a percentage of the national fleet. So whilst we acknowledge that that would be a better and more appropriate measure, at present there is no way for us to actually measure that at a regional level.
What I'd like to know, it's all very well for us to measure it and set targets. Are we actually doing anything though to encourage it? All we're doing is reporting what the market is doing, and it's nice for us to just sort of pluck a number and put a target on it. But what are we doing to influence it?
So my response to that, Chair, would be within the Regional Land Transport Plan sits a load of projects which are predominantly delivered by the territorial local authorities. So when those projects are being developed and scoped, what we encourage those project teams to do is reflect on the outcomes that are being sought from the Regional Land Transport Plan and then consider how those projects can support a move towards those. So for example, with this one, it would be essentially when a TLA is developing a new car park, for example, is there a consideration around dedicated parking spaces for low emission or zero emission vehicles, as an example. So the plan itself won't achieve this. It's the projects within the plan that we're encouraging to make progress towards this.
Is there anything in the vehicle charging that territorial authorities are involved with? Want to facilitate EVs, it comes back to the network of charging, doesn't it?
And I just had a thought, what about allowing EVs in the T2 or T3 lane as opposed to petrol vehicles?
About hybrids.
Thank you, Ken. Without wanting to get into the details of the ways we might implement the target, my question is around, I understand that as a result of the fuel constraints, EV and hybrid sales are going up significantly in any case. Obviously, we need to look at how do we support the transition. But my question is in terms of the target, how does that impact the target? Because if we see a 30% take up just because of the fuel crisis, does that affect how the kind of target that we want to set? Do we want to be more ambitious and use that to springboard to say, how can we support more? How do we want to approach that?
Through the chair, so again, to provide a bit more context, so this is, all the points raised are very much the same ones we've heard from our regional advisory group. So a lot of it was how do we, especially as TLAs, influence this process, and Ollie's outlined one. Funny enough, it did come up in conversation, the T2, T3 conversation, whether we could allow low emission vehicles to be part of that, and that would be a concrete thing that TLAs could do. But essentially, what I'm wanting to just iterate is that this is very much the same view of the regional advisory group, that is this a meaningful measure? We've kept it because it aligns with the second national emission reduction plan and the government's focus on EV uptake. The other measure under environmental sustainability is around air quality, but you would see in your workshop pack that a lot of the other measures for that objective around transport emission reduction, etc., have been removed because that is the line of the second emission reduction plan.
We're on target, and the target's 30%, and the recommendation is that we keep it. Happy with that? Right, good. Let's move on.
Excellent. Final indicator with some options for the committee to discuss is indicator number 7, so demand for bus services. So this is essentially public transport patronage. So our current RLTP measure is to increase public transport boardings on average by 10% per annum to 2030. To give you an idea what that would look like, the graph on the left is reporting on our regional public transport plan, or the RPTP. And what we can see in blue is our actual patronage since 2017. And you can see kind of for the last financial year, our average patronage is just around, just over 3 million boardings per annum. So tracking great. But if we were to increase our patronage in line with this target, so 10% per annum to 2030, we would need to have a patronage close to 6 million. So that's the yellow bars on the graph here. So we would be looking at almost doubling our PT patronage in the next 4 years. So again, as you might appreciate, and aligned to the conversation we've had before, the staff recommendation is that we might want to revisit the target and more align it in line with current kind of funding realities for public transport. So what staff is proposing is aligning it with the regional council's long-term plan target, which you can see here on the right, which is an increase year on year.
Councillor Krause. and a great user of the public transport.
Well, I think you know what I'm going to say, because I think I said it previously when some of you were on the committee. I think we need to put a target that we want as opposed to what the government might dictate, bearing in mind the funding. And I say that because I think it's up to this group, respectfully, of mayors to actually do what, the one time you've all met with the minister a lot, I've had a chance to have one conversation with him, and his comment was come up with a plan, divvy it up into 3-year periods and put a bid in, because Tauranga needs a really good public transport system. So extending that bay wide, I don't know how that conversation would go, but certainly from a Tauranga Western Bay point of view, I guess I would sort of say we've gone from the ridiculous 20% mode share to the very disappointing if we go down this track. And just to make sure the committee's aware of it, that in the past, there was over 1 decade, there was a 21% increase in population. There was a 6-fold increase in patronage in the Tauranga Western Bay, which is what, 75–80% of all the bus network in the bay. So, and then we've had increased population growth. We've had 27% over the last decade in Tauranga. I'm not quite sure for the sub-region. And the reality is, although we have to take a bay-wide perspective, if we don't deliver on this, we're not going to deliver to the biggest urban area. So for me, to put in 10%, you've actually achieved it. You know, like that's the reality. You've achieved it for the first 2 years. To then propose to turn the dial down, I think would be a major mistake. And I would say the one other thing is that, you know, that there is to actually double patronage, because we've had a 6-fold increase in the past. You can look at other urban areas and other countries, even in other parts of New Zealand, and they have achieved this. And I don't agree we need to be aspirational and go 20% mode share, because that would be a goodness knows what, you know. I don't know if you know the number, Ollie, but it's some huge increase. But this, to me, is perfectly reasonable. And I'd be very disappointed to think that we couldn't go to the government with something to align this with all the plans that you guys have done over the years to try to drive something exactly along these lines. But I say that very respectfully, knowing that I don't have a say around this committee.
You know, the staff assessment is, though, that the current target of 10% patron growth is unachievable with current funding envelopes.
My point was that sort out the funding envelopes, please, committee.
Not commenting about this. I'm just commenting that I'm going to have to leave now because I've got a dentist appointment at midday and I don't want to miss it. So thanks very much today, and thanks for being a part of this.
Thanks, Greg. Appreciate your input. Councillor Schuler.
Thank you, Chair. I agree. I think we need, I agree with Councillor Crowther. I think, I don't think we do enough work on public transport and how to make it better. I think it's something that the city really needs. I think we need to work harder to get a better public transport system. When I talk to a few people that do use it, there's quite a lot of things they say it wouldn't be that hard to change, but when do we get to change it? When do we get to look at plans? We only pay for a certain amount, so we don't get a whole lot of say in what happens. So for me, I don't think the city can work out its congestion unless we start getting this sort of acceptance of public transport as a great way to get around the city. And I look at people in cars complaining about congestion and say, well, flip, it can't be that bad. Or you would have got on a bike or shared a car or got on a bus. So I would be really, just because it's hard is not a way to take it out. We can't be a well-planned, well-connected city that moves if our public transport doesn't work, and we need to figure out how to make it work. And so I will absolutely keep this benchmark.
Yes, Ollie.
Just to make members aware, so almost in parallel to this process, we're also reviewing our regional public transport plan, which is effectively exactly what this process is, but purely focused on public transport. So that will have the 10-year plan for public transport in it, of which the initiatives recommended will then go into this plan. So there is the opportunity for those two processes to be cognizant of each other to make sure that whatever projects are ultimately recommended for prioritization in this process, the growth that's envisaged from those initiatives is captured within this KPI. I think the point staff are making are within the current funding envelope, the growth anticipated from the current target is unachievable.
So we need a bigger envelope.
Or we need to think about it differently.
And there are two statutory, we've got to do a regional transport plan and there's a separate regional public transport plan, but the two must be aligned. So I think from what Ollie said, the work's still to be done on setting this for the regional public transport plan, and that will have to feed in and align with the regional transport plan.
Yes, the other thing I'd add, Chair, is most people will be aware that regional councils recently made some changes to its transport governance. So the regional public transport plan is going to, well, the plan is that it will come under the responsibility of this committee. So that will be discussed at your next formal meeting. But so you will get much better visibility across both of those plans. So you'll be able to make sure that they are lockstep with each other.
Councillor Graham.
Just to build on this conversation about the different plans, and I think this is probably the right time to raise it, but I'm just thinking about the interplay of the regional land transport plan, the public transport plan, and the regional spatial plan. And I just am wondering, so through this process, it's quite a that 3-year GPS focus. I understand through the regional land transport plan submissions, there was quite a lot of support coming through for multimodal shift and for rail and different things. So my question is, how is this committee providing for that long-term planning and strategy and investment for the whole transport network, both regionally and then particularly around Western Bay, which has the biggest population growth? And so possibly it needs to come through smart growth and the UFTI work. But I think my question to the committee is, would the committee like to, or should the committee be considering whether or not they would like to make a recommendation to smart growth, and that feeds through into, but it might be broader than smart growth as well, that feeds into the regional spatial planning work, about whether or not there is a need to perhaps revisit and refresh the vision within UFTI, and look at that whole of transport network so that we have a plan for that very long term, and we are thinking about the planning for the infrastructure that needs to support where we might like to get to. So thinking about if we want to have more rail in our network in the long term, what do we need to have around that? And how we're providing planning for park and ride to make all of that fit together. Are we thinking about ferries? So I think that's my question: is would this committee like to make some kind of a recommendation or something, and a core query that they would like to see that looked at within the work that's being done on, possibly through smart growth, the regional spatial plan, informing the regional spatial plan?
From a staff perspective, what we would do after this workshop is start to draft up the strategic narrative, which would include the direction that we're getting from forums like Smart Growth, the anticipated direction of regional spatial plans. And then that would provide an evidence base for the committee to then decide what the priorities are and where those sit across the time horizon to deliver against the strategic intent. Your question as to whether there's an appetite to revisit that overarching strategic intent, I think that's a political call if there is a will, and there is a feeling that needs to be updated.
I think it's well flagged, and it's something that we should keep in mind. Obviously, the integration of all of those plans is critical. So I think the point's well made, but I think at this stage, we can just leave it with the staff to sort of make sure that they bear that in mind as we move into further stages. Mayor Daniel.
First, I think we're getting way off the topic of setting a target for this. So, but you know, it's an interesting point to make. I think the way forward would be at a future committee meeting, resolve to make a submission to the next future development strategy and smart growth. That would be the way to encompass that.
I think, we've got the germ of the concept. We've got to flesh it out. So we've got a very firm, clear recommendation to those processes that you outlined.
Thank you. I'm disagreeing, Mayor Denyer. I think that we're setting a framework here for a future, and we've mentioned, I think, 3 times in here is mentioned the spatial plan. We're talking public transport and being told that it's being done separately. If we're thinking like this without like this, we're not going to get a framework that allows us to invest for the future that we really need to do as a sub-region. So I'm very much in favour of suggesting it's not the bad time to do it, because we need to be thinking about these things as we look for the next 10 years. And if we're thinking in silos, then we don't take into account what public transport is doing or allow for what we need here in the spatial plan. And from our perspective, the spatial plan's been done by regional council, and so if it's left on a staff basis, I don't know when that is brought up to governance level. So I think it's really important that we actually are thinking broadly and saying what else is influencing our decisions here, and those 2 things should be, in my view.
Question of dropping it, and as indicated, we're actually integrating public transport with this committee. So the proposal that will come to the formal meeting, this is a workshop, the formal meeting in June, is that this committee actually takes responsibility for public transport as well as the transport plan. And what I'd suggest, I just had a word with Ollie, is that staff actually bring a proposal to us to that next meeting on that exact point of how we might achieve that. Good.
Through you, Chair, perhaps as well, that paper can just do a bit of a horizon scan of the various policies and plans that are ongoing at the moment, and highlight any opportunities to encourage better alignment, just so everyone's on the same page as to what's out there.
Alignments of the plans is critical.
And possibly any extra work needed. So I think my question is also about, does it need a bit of a refresh and a re-look at, and is that needed within the regional spatial planning framework?
Yep. Thank you. Bailey.
Through the chair, always a fan of integrating all the pieces of work that we do. Congratulations to those who have the foresight to bring them together. It makes sense. My comment would be in regards to the public transport, particularly for the Eastern Bay sub-region. Again, it's the reasons for travel. So where we have a public transport system, and look, we can't be all things to all people, but the variable reasons why people might take up public transport, particularly in education. I know for Kawerau, that we have students who come across to Waikato, Tauranga every day, whereas the public transport, for probably fiscal envelope reasons, that's not offered every day. When we have regional employment opportunities that are taken up, we've got a lot of active community pages that just get on there and say, hey, is anybody looking to share drive and all that sort of stuff. So yes, again, there's a numeric measure of increase, but look, one of the many challenges, and we had this discussion when Bill Clark was our representative for Regional Council, was that the reasons why people take up or are considering public transport patronage are variable, and it's really tricky to be able to provide that almost on-demand service. Let's keep it in there. Let's join up what makes sense. I think that's beautiful. Actually, Kawerau, other than Deputy Chair McDougall getting in contact, Kawerau hasn't had direct invitation in the past. So my regards to our Deputy Chair for seeing all the four corners of our Bay of Plenty region in this triennium. But let's join them up, Chair. It makes all the sense in the world. Thank you.
So just in the interest of time, given that this committee is taking on responsibility for public transport governance and we need to do that deep dive, should we leave this KPI lying on the table and staff can go away? We can do that policy alignment work. We can make a recommendation to the June meeting and move forward from there.
I think that's exactly what we're wanting. So that's good. Thank you. Let's move on.
Excellent. Next slide, please. So we're on the home stretch now. So next, we're going to talk about RLTP policies. You would have seen in your workshop pack, there's quite a few slides in regards to this. I'm not planning to go through all of them. I think we can kind of skim through the majority. So first of all, why do we have RLTP policies? So each objective needs to have a headline target that's according to the LTMA, and we need to have a number of policies that support that objective, again, a requirement of the LTMA. The best way to look at these policies is that they're not actions, they're kind of our proposed way of doing things, and it's reflecting the fact that we, of course, need to work together as partner agencies to address all the transport challenges that we've identified as our objectives. Next slide, please. So to give you an idea of what these policies mean in action, in real life, we've provided two examples on two different objectives. So the first one is around healthy and safe people. So objective 1, so around the DSIs and kind of support that conversation we had around that target. So policy 1.1 is all about adopting a safe system approach. So I recall that we had some discussion around doing things differently. So that's talking very much to this policy. So essentially, we're aiming to reduce DSIs by designing a transport system that takes into account human error and focuses on creating a system that prevents these fatal crashes. To give you an idea what this looks like in action, I think we've mentioned quite a few of these initiatives already today. So of course, the police is a key player, and that's in regards to speed. Drugs and alcohol, NZTA have a role. There's lots of regional billboards around the place, and then probably of particular interest is the point-to-point camera, so the average speed cameras that are getting rolled out across the country. And I just came from Whakatane this morning, and there's a billboard saying that these will be active on the Matata Strait at the end of this month. And then, of course, a number of other state highway improvement projects. And then the TLAs do run road safety education programs and incorporate those local road kind of safety improvements in part of their BAU. Next slide, please, Amanda. The other example is very much around the environmental sustainability that we've discussed today. So actively promoting low carbon transport options and fuel technologies. There's quite a few partner agencies here. And again, some examples, and we've talked about this, is the rollout of EV charging stations. So that's mainly the responsibility of NZTA and private providers. For public transport, we are slowly moving towards electrifying our fleet. The public sector is electrifying the corporate fleet, and then there's a range of promotion and travel behavior campaigns that a lot of the TLAs are involved in. Next slide, please. So as mentioned, we have a number of policies for each of the objectives. I won't be going through all of these. We've taken a very similar approach that we've done to the majority of the strategic framework. So a lot of the staff assessment is that it's fit for purpose, and that we have consolidated a lot of the policies together. So if I could please get the next slide. So what I have is a number of these summary slides for the different objectives. I was originally planning to stop at the end of each, but maybe it is of the interest of the committee that we have a general discussion on the policies and whether the committee is comfortable with the direction where the majority are fit for purpose. And we have consolidated a lot of the policies, and probably the biggest difference, if you can go to objective 3, the summary slide, please, Amanda. So the only major change for all of our policies, apart from rebooting and some consolidating, is the inclusion of these 2 new policies around inclusive access. So our previous ones, and this talks to a lot of the conversation we've had this morning. So our current policies under this one is about implementing the regional public transport plan, so the RPTP, as well as partnering with Mauri, and looking at on-street space use. So what we are recommending for this objective is that we broaden that to include 2 new policies, so encouraging place-based approaches tailored to local need, and especially in rural and isolated areas of our region. And then the second policy is around improving accessibility features. So there's a number of different things here that the TLAs and ourselves at Regional Council would look at in terms of public transport to improve accessibility for people with mobility challenges.
I think it's best that we do concentrate this, focus it on the summary. I think Councillor Daly, you had a comment?
Well, obviously, you're trying to fast track this workshop and get out of here as quick as possible. So, obviously, the RAGs have discussed this at staff level, and I don't think, from our point of view, I don't think it's come back to our council to discuss any of these.
Actually, discuss it with
options.
me first, Grant.
So, I'm just suggesting: is the committee open to email suggestions to some of these potentially, rather than trying to edit or add or delete any of these now? Is there an opportunity for a bit of a considered approach to make some suggestions, because we're clearly not going to do it in this workshop?
Yes, is the answer to your question, Councillor Daly. However, what we've tried to encourage from RAG members is that RAG members are briefing their RTC members, and there is that 2-way conversation. So there's the option for you to input into this forum, but also to provide that feedback so it comes into the technical advisory group as well. So we'll suggest that your RAG member reaches out to you and Mayor Denyer.
And I think it's very important that elected representatives from the territorial authorities keep in close contact with their RAG representatives, so that the technical people are aligned with the governance people in all respects, because we did have a bit of a fall down in the last triennium in that regard. Mayor Denyer.
Sorry, I completely disagree. We need to work through this now. Hopefully we can keep it high level and quick. I have a couple of comments, if we can, to work through in objectives, policies 2.6 to 2.8. I'm struggling to see how those fit into 2.2. Things like talking with major employers to develop travel planning tools. I'm not sure how that fits into transitioning to a zero emission bus transfer fleet. So there's a little bit of uncertainty about how that works. And then I did have a comment on 4.8 as well, which is fine, but it does need to include the word rail in there somewhere, because it seemed to have lost the idea of rail completely from that one. Largely, I'm fine with them.
Response from staff on those matters?
Yeah, I'm not sure if it's a typo in the workshop pack. So the removal of targets 2.6 and 2.8 Merdenia, they would be rolled up under 2.2, which focuses on the development and implementation of plans that reduce transport greenhouse gas emissions and support resilience.
So I did misread that one, but again, I don't think that fits into that one particularly well.
Yeah, happy to.
I mean, if we're trying, previously we explained we're trying to reduce the number of measures, and that I get that as KPIs, but I'm not quite sure we're reducing number of policies particularly, and some of those policies have a particular niche which I think are beneficial, and I'm not quite sure we're losing them.
Through the chair, just a staff comment. So very happy to look at the policies, and if there's particular ones that you feel are encapsulating things in that wouldn't otherwise be covered when we consolidate, I'm more than happy to keep those.
And this is an iterative process with the advisory group, so we'll take those comments on board, Merdenia, and look at these again.
Good, thank you. Yes, Councillor Schuler.
Thank you, Chair. I'm just looking at 2.7 and 2.8 about interconnected walking and cycling networks. And I've raised this at Tauranga City Council, and our Te Papa spatial plan did have a 7-kilometre cycle track, but that just disappeared. So I think, yes, we're looking at lowering emissions, but we also need to recognise that there's got to be some work done, and a policy that is just about reducing emissions is not, if we're dropping those, I just feel we're missing out on the ability to say, even within our team, we said they hadn't ever thought of commuting through Tauranga. All of the things are that you commute in and then have a slow time in Tauranga, for example. So to me, when we look at our beautiful region for cycling, I would have thought that these are policy, and I don't know how the policies work with actual activity, but to me, removing both of those and suggesting they go in 2.2 is, unless we're extending 2.2 to be specific about cycling and walkways.
Again, I think if the staff would note those comments and talk to it through with the RAG and the technical people, and as it said, it's an iterative process, it's ongoing. There's been some great contributions, so that's all helpful. Back to you, Catherine.
Absolutely noted, and happy to keep those. And again, to provide a bit more context, we did have a discussion around some of this with our regional advisory group, and they did note similar concerns. A lot of this has been done to kind of simplify our strategic framework, but also reflect the funding environment. But totally taking on board the comments from the committee, and happy to
Yeah, I think that the direction we're clearly getting is we've gone too far with our attempts to simplify. So we will look to reconsider this within the context of what we've heard from the committee today.
Yes.
Let's make one more comment. I also think when we're talking about environmental harm, because that's what we mostly are, we're also being quite prescriptive that it's fossil fuels or emissions that we're looking at, and it's just, I haven't seen, are we enabling drone delivery for the goods you order at night? Are we promoting, if we've actually got more freight going to rail as a percentage per year than we've got growth in our city, are we saying that the roads keep needing to be built, or are we actually saying we're doing different ways? So I just would like more open. We don't know whether Tauranga could be the first city of driverless cars in New Zealand, right? But I don't see as much innovation, and we're only looking at a little bit to the wording. So I would just like a little bit more blue sky thinking, and let's not box ourselves in with what does sustainable mean.
Helpful, right. Patrick, back to you.
Probably just picking up on that comment, from a staff perspective, it would be really useful to understand whether there's anything missing in terms of the policies. So you've talked about the kind of technologies and embracing that. Is there any other key themes that are not currently captured by the policies that staff could consider part of this review?
I think that's the answer. We don't know because we're not exploring. So it's really just my feel, and I'm not an expert in this, but I read this and I think, have we considered what they're doing in Sweden or Holland, or are we actually being proactive enough if some of these are enabling the thinking of the experts for the next 10 years?
Huge topic. That's sort of a vision of the possible based on future technologies versus but a very valid point. I think there's a clear message there. Let's think of, and at some stage perhaps staff might like to bring a paper to us on a real futuristic possibility type thing. Is that the sort of thing you're looking for? Yeah. Sure.
So when these are reviewed, we'll put that lens of innovation across that review.
Good. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you, committee. So that is the kind of conclusion of the strategic framework review. Before we go into the recapping and outlining next steps, I do want to ask whether the committee still wanted to circle back to the problem statements, or whether we are quite happy with what we've heard. Staff definitely feel like we've got the direction needed. It's essentially what I'm asking is whether this committee is comfortable with what we've discussed today and is happy for us to do that required additional work.
I think we covered most of the issues that were flagged early in terms of subsequent stuff like the monitoring and things like that. Unless any members of the workshop can identify anything that we have missed a need to reflect back on, but I think there's been some good guidance given there. And if everyone's happy, we can move on to that concluding recap. Everyone happy? Okay, let's move on to the recap.
Thank you, Amanda. So, yep, this is a recap slide that we did in the beginning. So these are the things that we've talked about today. And as mentioned at the very beginning, the intention of this RLTP review is to focus on the prioritization and the program development. And that is the topic of workshop 2 and workshop 3. So if I can get the next slide, please, Amanda. This is our final slide. So it's just a recap that the meaty stuff is coming this winter in workshop 2, where we'll be talking about the prioritization methodology. And then by the end of the calendar year, we'll hopefully already have kind of a draft prioritized list, a draft document, and then we'll be taking that to the RTC, to this committee in February next year, and then do our statutory kind of consulting process. But a lot of the direction that we've got from the committee is that you want to see a lot of more focus on the program development, and that's upcoming in workshop 2, and then we'll hopefully have a GPS by then as well.
Might pay to just add final GPS date in there as well, given it could be, usually is different to the one that will be coming out as a draft.
Thanks, Katri. Before I pass back to the chair, I just wanted to acknowledge that we have moved at pace today, and I know that there might be some aspects where perhaps there was conversation still to have. This is an iterative process, and ultimately we don't have to submit this plan until well into 27, although I'm sure that will arrive quite quickly. We have received some very useful direction today, so we will go away and we will process that, and we will revise the draft with the RAG group, and the conversation will continue. But your input is very much appreciated, and we do acknowledge the fact that we have had to cover a lot of ground today, given the committee's desire to start talking about the prioritisation and the projects when we reconvene in August. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Ollie. I accept we've moved at pace, but hopefully not in decent haste. So I think at that point then we're happy to conclude the workshop, and thank you, Nandor.
My apologies for this, and I should have flagged this earlier, but if I could just take a minute, I'd like to, I'm asking if it's possible to enlist the support of this committee on a matter to do with special purpose roads for the Eastern Bay, where there's State Highway 38, which goes to Murupara, stops, becomes a special purpose road, gets picked up again near Waikaremoana. The history of how that came to be a special purpose road is curious. It's been 100% funded by NZTA. NZTA now wishes to renegotiate the FAR rate for that. It's a serious issue for our community. I realise I'm not meaning to have a discussion about it now, but is there some way of circulating information and seeing if the committee is prepared to support our bid to return that to State Highway? Yes. But that 38 one's the most significant, because of the resilience issues around it.
Andrew, can you comment on that?
Yeah, obviously won't get into too much of the detail, given it's our board that needs to make a decision on this. But I think committee advocacy as part of the case you're putting to our board would no doubt be useful. Yeah,
I think a parallel one of action that has occurred is given the Waiweka Gorge situation and the connectivity and resilience, and a joint letter which you would have seen has been sent, which I co-signed on behalf of this committee with the mayors of Te Rāwhiti, and I think David, you signed it too, and a number of others, just recognising or asking government NZTA to recognise the importance of that resilience, or the need for resilience and connectivity between Te Rāwhiti and the Bay of Plenty from a total connectivity point of view. So that's another action with the NZTA.
Yeah, don't underestimate the importance of your power as advocates around this committee table. I think, that's resulted in a meeting with the Minister on the 20th of May now. But also, the Appleton Road residents that presented to the last committee as well. There's been some change that will occur in coming weeks out on that stretch of State Highway 2 as well.
So yes, this is exactly what this committee should be doing on behalf of the region.
They bring a paper to the next committee.
It may be that there's a timing issue as well. So I'm wondering if it's possible to circulate something. I recognise the committee's been quite dynamic and responsive with I think the Appleton Road issue. If I could circulate something and see if there is support, maybe.
The other thing I'd add, it might not be appropriate in this instance, Mayor, but it's not only regional council staff that can bring papers before the RTC. So any member organisation can bring a paper before this committee if there's a matter of regional significance that needs to be discussed.
Thank you very much. Yeah. So I can say I'll circulate something if that's permissible. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.